Welcome to the very first seminar of 2026. And I'm sure this is going to be the beginning which will set the tone for more seminars this year. And we have an excellent presentation today by Amit Thorat. Amit is a faculty at Center for Study of Regional Development at Jawaharlal Nehru University. Somebody who has been working on several issues, I must say, and somebody who has been very closely associated with the India Human Development Survey, the big survey that is there. And he has examined a lot of issues related to that, but also various other issues. But I think today what he is going to present is something which is where he has been working for quite some time now. And it's a very, very important work, which I think is something which needs more discussion, at least more uh, debate on this issue. And that's an issue on caste reparations. We have seen the issue of reparations being talked about in other contexts, particularly in US and South Africa and in other places, but not so much in terms of caste, and I hope Amit will make a very persuasive case as to why it should be there. And to discuss his paper and his findings is Harish Wankhede, who is no stranger to CSH. He has been here a number of times. And Harish is again somebody who is from JNU, teaching in Center for Political Studies for more than a decade now, and somebody who has engaged with the issue not just academically, which is what is, but also otherwise. And it's something which he has engaged quite closely with this issue. And I hope we are going to have a very good discussion. So the way we'll start the seminar is that you'll have around 45 minutes. Is that fine? Yeah. We'll have around 15-20 minutes for Harish to give his comments, and then we'll open for the discussion. People who are joining online, may I suggest that you hold your questions till the end of the presentation, and then after Harish's comments, we will take the questions from online as well, and you can do it in the chat box, as well as you can actually raise your hand, and we will be able to call you in for asking the questions. So I don't want to waste much time on other formalities. So over to you, Amit.
Thank you, Himanshu, Odell, and David for organizing this. This is my first time here, so quite excited, a little nervous as well with the questions, but here goes. So I'm going to make a case for caste reparations for India. That's the title of my presentation. And what I'm going to talk about is why do we need to think about reparations for minorities in Southeast Asia and in India particularly, and in India for Dalits. That's what I'm going to talk about. There are other minorities in India. There are tribes. There are lower OBCs, religious minorities whose situation is similar yet quite different from that of the Dalits, their historic evolution and existence. So today I'm going to make a case for their reparation. I'll also briefly talk about compensation, restitution, representation, reservations in the context of reparations. They have a lot of things in common and they also differ from each other in substantial ways. And then try and make an argument for why reparations are justified morally and ethically in the context of India. So these are some of my publications in the last 6 years, based on which I'll be talking. There's a paper, a book chapter, a report, and another paper over the last 5 years. But mind you, this is preliminary work. This is a huge, huge time period in history, which we are trying to understand, and therefore these are just preliminary analysis which I have done, and I think this requires decades of work with a large number of people working on different aspects of uh, this question. Okay, so we know that reservations have been critical for providing access to educational institutions, legislature, government jobs after independence. However, we also know that the quantum of these jobs have come down from 6% to now 3% of all jobs in the economy. So all the debate on reservations, etc., that you hear today about subclassification, creamy layer, etc., is only for 3% of the jobs in the economy. So, I mean, yeah. Um, but having said that, without reservation, it seems impossible that people from these communities could have gained access. So when you look around, people from scheduled caste or scheduled tribe communities, these are uh, 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 first generation, second generation learners. You don't really find third generation learners. So this is a second or third generation which is now availing or getting access in universities, in government jobs, in private sector. Not in the private sector through reservation, but the second and third is because of their parents getting access. So without reservation, access is very difficult to imagine. But even then, we this access is limited to government jobs. The entire private sector, formal and informal, is out of the ambit. And we know from studies that there is market discrimination and exclusion of Dalits and other minorities. There are studies done by IDS, and there are other studies which show that even in the first interview call, when you send your CVs, resumes, just on the basis of your name, second name, you're not called even for the first level of interview. Um, Also, we know that seats, reserved seats in IITs, IIMs, universities, government institution are not filled, and disproportionately higher representation is easily seen from non-scheduled groups in the judiciary, the legislature, the media, private sector, and elsewhere. So, despite reservation, there is access, but it's not completely implemented, and still we do not find representation in the higher echelons of the, different sectors of the uh, economy or the country. Um, Now, one has to understand that the SC, ST, OBC, all these scheduled groups have been able to access reservation in the last 75 years by sheer hard work and determination. And why I say this is because they entered the market at the dawn of independence with almost nothing. What is the lack of, what is called the lack of endowments, physical, educational, social, cultural capital, due to pre-market exclusion and discrimination. So the little access and gain you see is due to their sheer hard work and merit, if you want to use that word, and it sometimes get lost in the discussion that at the cusp of independence, they did not have access to land. Very few people had access to land, if at all. They were not owner cultivators, they were tillers of the land. They did not have access to property, shops, maybe their houses. The land the houses was built was not theirs. They were not allowed to accumulate wealth, gold, cash, or financial assets. Access to income earning assets was barely anything. And this is all because of caste ordained restrictions that a Shudra or Ati Shudra cannot accumulate wealth because it gives pain to the Brahmin. It's written there. So that translates into this kind of endowment structure. And of course, absence of human, social, civil, and political rights till independence and the constitution. So this is forgotten, that at the cusp of independence, they had nearly nothing. And then, due to reservation, even accessing that, our grandfathers and fathers had to sacrifice so much just to get their one child educated. So that is the context. I'm going to quickly bore you and run through some of the indicators which show the gap as it exists. Despite the reservation, despite 75 years, a lot has been achieved. I'm not saying, but if you look at land ownership and other indicators I'll come to, you find substantial differences. For instance, as you can see across social groups, most of the households are marginal landowners. However, you see that this disproportionately higher marginality among the SCs and Muslims. But Muslims, 60% of them live in rural areas, 40% live in urban areas. They're also into crafts and other skill trade. However, 75% of SCs live in rural areas. So they're dependent on agriculture more so than anyone else. And as you go down the land classification, or up rather, from landless, marginal, small, medium to large, you see that there's a slightly disproportionately higher ownership of land, larger land tracts amongst the Hindu SC or the Hindu OBC. Tribals have land, but even they are suffering. Again, if put it differently, if you look at the share of households uh, uh, across social groups and their share in ownership of land area, you see that there are discrepancies. ST in 2013, and these are dated figures because the new data sets are very difficult to understand. Think they're credible. So I'm just going to stick till 2011-12 figures, and then Himanshu can correct me if I'm wrong or add in latest figures to say if this has changed or not, or is it continues. The differences continue. So you can see that 20% of SC households own only 9% of land, whereas 23% of other households have 32% of land. And in terms of average land size is hectares in area, acres, sorry, even the average land size are higher. So we still have differences there. These are just indicative figures. I'll get back to it later if required. The All India Debt and Investment Survey looks at the value of household level land, building, livestock, farm, non-farm equipment, transport vehicles, and financial assets such as shares, debentures, etc., and calculates its aggregate value. And in 2013, of the total combined value of these assets, the scheduled caste own only 7.6%, whereas the high caste own a staggering 41% of the assets. Now, updated 2019 survey shows these have changed from 7.6 to 8.7 for scheduled caste, and from 41, uh, uh, yeah, it has come down for the high caste to 26%. No, sorry, 27 to 26%. But the problem with this new data set is it misses out on the top 10% of the richest family, where all the wealth has seemed to have just magnetically or something, just gone up. And now they own about 72% of the wealth stock. This exercise was done by Ishan in IIT, who looked at the Forbes list of top 100 rich people and then looked at their market capitalization and added that to this. So that's how we can do it. Otherwise, the new data sets are increasingly showing better and better picture, which are very tough to digest. Uh, Again, enrollment levels having improved across social groups, but you can see there are differences uh, uh, within across social groups. Even if we look at the latest data, and I have just added this today, we see enrollment has gone up, but differences remain, substantial differences remain. And tribals are also suffering in many cases more than Dalits. Um, Again, dropout rates higher uh, for the SC and ST, ST more in this case. Muslims are close by, and then uh, high caste Hindus the lowest. So there is that gap persists. I mean, whatever you do, the gap is not getting bridged, and that's my point. Uh, Similarly, mortality rates. This is from NFHS 5, the last data set which we think is credible, till James was unceremoniously uh, asked to go from IPS. So we have some credibility here. And again, you can see these are higher for SCST, uh, and the lowest for the others. The OBC come in the middle. So the gap again remains. These are poverty estimates from the India Human Development Survey. These are slightly different from the NSSO poverty estimates, but very close. Uh, uh, and we see that between 2004, 5, and 11, 12 was the period when we saw the most substantial reductions in poverty. Uh, you can see also the percentage point reductions. But you see the relative differences remain, you know. When the economy grows and everyone gets something, somehow the relative differences don't seem to get bridged for some reason or the other. And that's my question. Okay. So where did we start and what happened? So in 2018, there was a commission on reparation that was set up at the Howard Medical School along with Lancet. Lancet had initiated this. And there were 10 groups who were representing different communities across the world to make a case for reparations. And these are the communities in front of you. I'm just going to quickly run through them. African American descendants of slaves, indigenous black population victims of South African apartheid, descendants of Caribbean slaves, the Roma, the Romani people of Europe, women who have been a victim of war and conflict, Native American and Canadian indigenous people, Congolese people, and Latin American and African countries who suffered from the debt trap of IMF and World Bank. This is James Heckel at SOAS, who's doing this, who was making the case. And then we were there to try and figure if there is a case for the caste oppressed ex-untouchables, uh, their descendants, and the descendants of the caste enslaved, ex-caste enslaved, their descendants, and climate reparations. So this was the group. I will tell you a bit more about the politics of how, after till now, half of it is published and half of it is still not published, and why, but that can come in the question and answer. Okay, so what we discovered and kind of find out is that no other group, which I mentioned earlier, had suffered for as long as the Dalits anywhere in the world. It's the longest historic exploitation, discrimination, exclusion, humiliation, degradation of any group anywhere in the world, except for women. And surely this long period of suffering of 2,500 years, which I'll get to in a bit, is bound to have very unique and very severe down the line effects uh, uh, on their descendants. Uh, uh, Also, at the time of independence, when we have the constitution comes in and all kinds of reform come in, but even beyond that, and it's getting worse with rising inequality and the political environment which you see today. These things are not getting improved. They improve for a bit, but they're getting worse now. Um, And this hasn't been studied, that there is a history of caste oppression, the longest in the world, and we just haven't factored that in and studied the effect of that in, intergenerational transmission of the trauma, hurt, economic, social, cultural disadvantage. And we just assume that now they have to compete with everyone else as like, it's the same level playing field. It's just mind boggling that we also, no, nobody thought about this. Now, reservations have been there to in place to give representation and ensure that continuing discrimination and exclusion doesn't happen. But there has been no policy which has been proposed even or instituted for compensating this community for this systematic exclusion exploitation for thousands of years in history. So if you look at the Constituent Assembly debate when the Constitution was being debated, and you look for the word compensation, you find a reference at one place where one Mr. S. Nagappa, who's a member of parliament, says that the Harijans, the Dalits or scheduled caste, who were called Harijans at that time, should be given 10 acres of irrigated land or 20 acres of unirrigated land, and their children's education should be funded till graduation. And to that, there's a response from someone who says, "Oh, if we are getting land, then any Brahmin will want to become a Harijan." And then Nagappa says, "Okay, sure, why don't you become a Harijan? Then you have to clean shit, clean the roads, pick dead animals, etc. If you're willing to do that, become a Harijan." And so that's the only reference. And strangely, Ambedkar never mentions reparations or compensation. I think the reason is that he thought that by giving reservation in education, the legislature, and possibly translating into the judiciary and elsewhere, once you get representation, the people will fight for their rights, and that will help. And land reform was on the cards. Land reform was a big ticket thing, and the hope was that the land will go to the tiller, which never happened. The only exception to this is the scheme which was recently launched by the Congress government in Telangana called Dalit Bandhu, implemented in the Huzurabad district of Telangana, where this is about, I have to check, about 4 5 years ago, I think. 21, yeah, 5 6 years ago, exactly. So they give 17,000 families a one-time cash transfer of 10 lakh rupees. And there's a paper by Nair at Harvard. He and two co-authors, they analyze ex ante the impact of this scheme on Dalit households, and they find tremendous impact. People bought income earning assets like tractors and cars and other things. They invested in the repair of their house. They invested in the education of their children. Their economic and social status went up in the society. And the backlash effect was when the upper caste were asked, "What do you think about this scheme?" They said, "Oh, it's fine and all, but now no benefit should go to Dalits anymore." So there is a backlash effect for sure. But this is the only example when a lump sum money, substantial amount of money was transferred, and uh, 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 it has impacted these families positively. Okay. So then we started wondering what to do with this thing, and we started looking at literature and origins of caste, how caste came into being, evolved, changed, got implemented, got entrenched, etc., etc. So we had to rely on historical studies. So we this is the timeline that we looked at these periods, and we look at the mention of caste or varna vyavastha or the fourfold classification across various Hindu texts that have been studied and referred to by historians. So it starts with, of course, in the 15th century with Rig Veda. The Purusha Shukta talks about the four classification. It's reiterated in Dharma Sutra, Apastamba, Vashishta, Gautama, Bodhayana. Then Ramayana, Mahabharata also give it sanction. Manusmriti then takes this, makes it legal and penal. And also the Narada and the other Smriti does the same. Then the Manu Smriti, the Narada Smriti, and Kautilya's Arthashastra, they mention 759 types of slaves, which is the discovery we made about caste slavery. And in that includes, apart from other kinds of slaves, caste slaves. So certain caste among the scheduled caste, subcaste, were designated as slave caste. So you're born into a slave. So if your children are basically born as slaves, and this continues in theory and in theology, and then somewhere in the post-Vedic period, this becomes the doctrine of some rulers, and they implement it as a governance strategy in their populace, and that's where it starts getting. Earlier, it's just in theology, but then it starts getting implemented in real life. Then we move to the medieval period. Then you have these invasions by various rulers who form small kingdoms, the Ghaznavids, Khilji, Tughlaqs, etc. But they also do so. They do nothing in terms of questioning or changing the system, occupational system or slavery system. Very little work is there on this. Moshwi has done some work. Her PhD thesis is on slavery during this period. And she says that because these invaders came from Arabia and Islam originated in the Caliphate in Iran, there they also had a very differentiated society along the lines of tribes, and they saw the Zoroastrians and other as weak people. So they came with an idea of this hierarchy, and there are instances where they praise the Brahmins for their wisdom and everything, and so they did nothing to oppose or change the caste system. And we keep moving to post medieval period, and in the south of India you have very clearly written inscriptions, etc., that the untouchables had segregated living outside village, towns, and cities. They had separate roads. The Brahmins and the ruling class colluded to put excess taxes on them so that they cannot accumulate wealth. This is all, I'm talking from published work done by historians. And so this goes on. And then we come to the British period, finally till in 1843, where the Anti-Slavery Act comes in, uh, is brought in, and I'll talk about that. So what we see is this evolution of caste, new frontier groups, tribes, etc., being included in the untouchable group. I mean, basket weavers. I mean, why would you include them as untouchables? Nobody knows. And all kinds of other people. These medicine men, they are they were because they were probably using they had to check your urine and stool to understand your condition. So that's seen as impure. So they are shoved into the untouchable category, and this inclusion keeps growing over the period. Okay. This is the timeline. I'm going to skip this. This is a big timeline of different historical periods, etc. And we had to kind of map it to see what was going on to get a sense. Okay. The big revelation to us was, apart from the untouchability in caste system, there were subcastes which were designated as slave caste and continued to be slave under the Hindu law. And to our mind, this continued till 1843, till Anti-Slavery Act was implemented under Act 5 of the Anglo-Indian law. And recent works by Sanal Mohan, his book Modernity of Slavery, and Rupa Vishwanathan's book The Pariah Problem clearly bring out a lot of evidence from various sources church sources and other English sources on based on documentation done by the British in India, the church in India, and others that clearly cast slavery continued in a huge way in India. Um, so our hypothesis or our contention is that untouchability, of course, but even caste slavery continues through the, if not the Vedic period, but through the medieval, Mughal, and the British period, at least till 1843. And then even after that, because, and I'll come to that, after independence, in the form of bonded, debt, attached, or indentured labor, the Bonded Labor Act comes in 1876. So I mean, it's just incredible. So even though the British made the Hindu practice of caste slavery and caste trade illegal, they made the caste trade illegal. Okay, trade in slaves was illegal. They failed to provide the ex-slaves any compensation or reparation. If you look at the law, they don't define slavery. They don't define the timeline for when the slavery will be, abolished by. There is no punishment. There is no compensation. All they do is use the IPC, which was already in place, to make abduction, trafficking, forced labor, and killing, which is already illegal, part of the Slave Act, and that's it. So the slavery by default is not uh, 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 defined. So all the magistrates in the presidencies and the judges in Bombay, Madras, whatever presidencies, they had to just interpret it their own way, and it was very loose. So it basically continued. Okay, here I show you a table from a PhD thesis of Christina Molfenter, called The Poor Law to Fundamental Rights, the Gradual Change of an Institution. So she exactly looks at the period from 1843 to 1990. That is when the Bonded Labor Act finally gets implemented. In that period, what is happening to all these people? This is University of Rochester, Professor Supervisor is Subrata Mitra. So from 1807 to 2016, she gives various estimates of the numbers of slaves in various regions of India where the British did cadastral surveys or the Law Commission went and did their surveys and other people did their surveys. So you can see, for instance, in Malabar, 96,000 slaves, in Lower Assam in 1930, 27,000 slaves. And then in 1841, for British India, you have an estimate of 1 crore, that is 1 million, or 10, I think, yeah, 15 million slaves. That's Adam William, uh, and he deposes at the General Anti-Slavery Convention and indicates that his estimates for slave population for British India range from 10 to 20 million. The British and Foreign Anti-Slavery Society, 1841. This is from his deposition to the Anti-Slavery Society in England. Then you come down to again to 1981, the bonded labor, figures are there. Again, 1873, you have, 5 crore, 41 lakh slave population. So these are the figures which were, uh, we had no idea about. And then you have the census figures. I don't know why she hasn't mentioned the census figures, but probably they don't define it. They just give the caste name. And from there, you have to assume which are the slave castes. So that's why she hasn't given them. But I want to look at that later on. Okay. Okay. So let me now. So the argument is that there is a continuous chain where a very large number of people suffered not only caste slavery and untouchability, which also is similar but at times worse, as Ambedkar said, than slavery, for a continuous period of time till independence, till 1843. But after that, uh, they continued because they had no compensation. They continued with their master as bonded slave, dead slave, etc. And their condition was no better. And then, as bonded laborers, the Bonded Labor Act comes in 1970s. So you can imagine what is the plight of these people. Okay, so how much time? Okay, so let me talk a little bit about compensation, reparation, and restitution. As slight differences and similarities. So compensation, as you all know, sounds similar to both reparation and restitution. It just means covering a loss or a harm or a damage caused to people, either by a wrongdoing, intentional wrongdoing, or not. It could be an accident, a natural calamity, the loss of a person, a kin in a road accident, second degree manslaughter or whatever, unintentional. So you cover that loss through monetary or in ways, or in kind or whatever. So it's just any kind of damage, loss, harm which is intentional or unintentional, that is being uh, compensated for. Restitution, simply put, is restoration of something lost or stolen to its rightful owner, and it is conditional on separation of something from its rightful owner. So, that's of course. However, it does not take for granted always that a wrongdoing has occurred in the act. It could be a mistake, it could be an accident, etc. So, for instance, if A steals B's bike and then simply returns it back without any explanation or expression of remorse or apology, one can say restitution has happened but not reparation, because the bike was stolen, the person went through B went through distress and anxiety, and nothing has been done for that distress or anxiety, though the cycle has been returned or restituted. So now reparation can happen only after any loss or damage has occurred from a wrongdoing. And reparation is also a right or a cluster of rights, while a restitution is not always a right. That is how uh, we can distinguish these two. So, in the above example, if A returns B's bike and also apologizes for the wrongdoing, then one can say reparation has happened, as B now feels that not only has the bike been returned, restituted, but the apology also satisfies her for the emotional distress, and she now feels satisfied. And in the above example, if the bike is stolen, is lost or destroyed, and A apologizes for it, and B feels satisfied, even then reparation has happened without restitution. So, uh, I mean, it's easy to say sorry and get away with it, I would say, but it's up to the person to say whether they feel reparated or not without restitution. Um, and if you ask the proponents, the champions of reparations for the African American descendants of slavery, they would say an apology is not enough. We need, first of all, material compensation. Apology is not enough. So, yeah. Um, okay. I'm going to talk a little bit about now the some kind of moral ethical arguments for reparation, and I'm going to start with John Locke, and I know Locke is very controversial. He said something and did something else altogether. So, people get after, but that's the point, right? He was a white man. He talked about reparations, and he also had investment in companies which earned from slave trade. He was all for private property, etc. But I think that makes the case even more strong to use his own argument against his own actions. And that's why I think this Locke is evoked by a lot of groups who talk about black reparations. So I'm going to go with that. So he actually is the first one to propose an argument for reparations, and and it has been used substantially. He believes that he believed people had natural rights, and all people had the same equal natural rights, whether you're born a farmer, or an aristocrat or a king. His contention was, and it was quite radical for his time, uh, and people should have they were naturally disposed to live peaceful and harmonious lives, and as opposed to being in a state of chaos, the Hobbesian state of chaos. So that was his assumption. And in case uh, these natural rights are violated by anyone intentionally, he proposed punishment. And punishment must be determined, and I quote, with so much severity as will suffice to make it an ill bargain to the offender, give him cause to repent, and terrify others from doing the like. Locke 1689. Uh, so, yeah, it's that. And to restore the harm that crime commonly causes some people or other, which is very important, and I'll come to that. Locke proposes reparation. He states reparations must give the satisfaction due to any private man or woman for the damages she receives. For him, the right to reparations emerges from the right to self preservation. These rights could be demanded only against the goods and services of the offender. So the offender is the one who pays the reparation. This implies that the victim of a wrongdoing has rights to reparation only from the wrongdoer. This, however, does not imply that the recipient must be made the immediate victim of the wrongdoer. He was of the opinion that a crime usually harms some people. So, a person dies is a victim of a violent crime, or lynching or something. It not only harms that person, but it harms that person's family, community, etc. So the reparations are also due to other people who suffer from this harm, and not just the victim, in this case where the victim is deceased and absent. Okay. Um, so he, however, makes a distinction between the right to reparation and the right to punishment. And the right to punishment he gives to the state and not to the victim. Even when the wrongdoer does not gain materially from the act or harm, reparations are due to the victim for her mental, personal, or psychological satisfaction. So there may be no material gain, there may be no stealing of land or property, there could be just violence, but that also entails reparations of various kinds. And if that entails that a material compensation has to be given, then that is also part of the reparations. Okay. The other argument which follows from Locke and is, there are problems with Locke's argument, and as counter to Locke, there are other arguments. And one of them is the harm argument, which states that uh, it relies on the idea that the transgressions of, say, slavery or caste untouchability or enslavement initiated an unbroken chain of harm linked as cause and effect that began with the untouchables and the caste enslaved. And these effects are passed on intergenerationally and manifest in their descendants to the present day. So even if the harm was done back in time, the harm is passed on intergenerationally. The disadvantage is passed on. The lack of material gain, the lack of safety, the lack of social and cultural capital, the lack of everything that it robs you of is passed on, because that disadvantage has to be then taken care of by subsequent generations, and they do not have the life they would have had that harm not happened. So you cannot disconnect past harm from the condition of their present descendants. Therefore, since the transgressions of caste untouchability, caste enslavement harm present day descendants, they have rights to reparations against those who committed those transgressions. Now, someone would say the people who committed those crimes are also not there. But then the people who benefited from their crimes are there now. So, this argument applies to present day descendants of those who were caste enslaved and suffered near caste slavery as untouchables, and in equal measure to any other group or descendant, be it the black descendants of slaves or Romani people or Native American people, anyone that, whose have descendants now, they have this right. Uh, the inheritance arguments claims that uh, that the people who were freed from slavery had rights to reparation for their injuries. If you accept that their crime was committed, then they were entitled to a compensation, and they held these rights against the slave owners and also against the state and the federal government for failing in their duties to protect them from the slave owners. And these rights were never honored. And finally, they passed on the right through inheritance to the present day descendants. So if compensation was handed out as inheritance, that would have been passed down to the descendants, which never happened. So once a law was passed to abolish slavery by the British, they were freed, so-called freed on paper, but they had no compensation, they had no land, they had nothing. So they just continued to work with their masters, now called as bonded laborers or debt labor. So that compensation which was due to them was never given by the British. The British brought the Anti-Slavery Act in 1833 in England, but they brought the same in India 10 years later. So for 10 years, they just used the slaves, caste slaves, the other labor for surplus extraction, uh, 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 and probably made common cause with the elites in India. The elites of Britain made common cause with elites in India, and used the reserve army of labor of the Shudras and Ati Shudras, 40 plus 20, 60% for surplus appropriation. Okay. Um, and last is the argument of spiritual renewal, which says that compensation and restitution are essential and the starting points in the process of healing and reconciliation. True reparation would demand, in addition, that there is also an acceptance of historic crimes and injustice, and that these have led to a causal chain of events that carried forward and affected and continues to the lives of the descendants of the victims of untouchability and caste enslavement. And I quote here Mr. Coates, Tanahashi Coates, and he wrote this in New York Times, which became quite famous. And he says, what I'm talking about is more than recompense for past injustices, more than a handout, a payoff, hush money, or a reluctant bribe. What I'm talking about is a national reckoning that would lead to spiritual renewal. Reparations would mean a revolution of the, in this case, American consciousness, a reconciling of our self-image as the great democratizer with the facts of our history. And I think this equally applies to the Indian case. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Uh, put it off. Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Amit. This was really a very persuasive argument, and I now hand it over to Harish to offer his comments.
Thank you. Thank you, Himanshu, for asking me to make comments on this very, very important uh, topic that Amit has introduced. Um, as a thought experiment, of course, I believe that probably the missing links of the moral and ethical philosophy that is there in India, that mostly we understand political or social issues through kind of an analytical or philosophy or analytical or policy framework. But the what Amit did today probably is to bring the larger claim for ethical persuasion, that somewhere the idea of a reconciliation for that matter. Such a powerful claim that without that sense of morality and ethical, doing anything is dangerous. And therefore, the kind of conditions in which we are living today are terrible or bad just because there is the prism of ethical persuasion is absent. And probably what Amit suggested today, I think I'll be mostly endorsing what he has suggested and argued for. Uh, One is, of course, the beginning, that somewhere the political or policy related debate on social justice is little bit uh, minimal today, and therefore the expansion is required. This claim is very, very crucial claim, that reservations or the policy framework for scheduled castes or scheduled tribe or OBCs, or the multiple constitutional applications that are available today, they are of course there, and it has grand impact in changing the social and economic discourse in India, but it is still limited. And why? Because it is still limited by because multiple other concerns are not been articulated through that particular model of social justice, which is there. So somewhere Amit's arrival here is to expand the available model of social justice for sure, and with a very sincere reading of history, that probably the conventional social justice practitioners have not done a critical reading of the history and how to what you call identify the untouchables in history. Probably we have seen them, probably it was thought that probably after the independence they are part of the larger social churning and they will also enter into the mainstream just because of some facilities provided by the state. But the missing reading of the history creates this kind of a tussle, and therefore probably this particular suggestion that the case of untouchability is not only about social customs or some terrible laws or certain practices here and there. Probably it's a kind of a ruler ethos that people practice something about against untouchables, and therefore there is some kind of a sense. But connecting it to the idea of slavery for that matter, I think this is very, very crucial, that we often see, and probably the positive reading of the caste system, that they are part of the labor class and they may be doing a menial job, but somewhere there is some kind of an acceptance and correspondence with the others, and therefore they are part of a what you call valued social system. But slavery simply challenges that and suggests that no, it is not. It is a bonded labor. It's very, very exploitative. It hardly had any sense of human life. It hardly provide you that kind of a sense of dignity and entry to do anything great. And therefore, this connection is very, very interesting, that untouchables are not part of the what they call hierarchical social locations where they are doing manual job, but they are almost like slaves. That they what we call the absence of any human sense, that they do not have the sense of dignity when they are performing in that particular part. And therefore, this reading of slavery and untouchability together is very, very interesting. Probably very few people must have done such kind of reading, that of course it was suggested they are dehumanized and terrible, but slavery somewhere also suggests that an exploitation of their labor, not only dehumanization and exploitation and their location outside, but deep exploitation of their manhood. That, I think, connection is very, very interesting. Third, probably the claim that the Indian state, or because of the presence of Ambedkar in the Constituent Assembly and the kind of policy framework we have, is kind of a remedial, somewhere allows people to enter into mainstream, but probably what Amit was also suggesting, the idea of reconciliation or remorse is absent in that. That there is no remorse about the past. And therefore, though we have borrowed so much from the Western traditions, from Western political philosophy for that matter, quoting Locke or Hobbes, or even when we are making the Constitution, was very much suggested that we are mainly borrowed from the Western traditions. So within that, when we think that somewhere the compensation is required, and the idea that the ex-untouchables are not have got the fair deal, and therefore the way at the global level today, there is kind of an arrival of a claim for reparation, and the list of people who are now coming up. So probably this particular claim suggests that the untouchables can also become part of the larger international claim for reparation, which was not there at the earlier time. It was seen as a kind of a very small Indian context, in which they will be provide some gifts, some support from the state, and it will be all right. But a larger claim that there is something called a solidarity between the entrenched slaves of the past, the Indian untouchables, and multiple other such communities can come together and read the history with a very different location now. And when we read history from that location, probably there can be a universal appeal for reparation and for compensation. I think that connectivity is very formidable connectivity. Interestingly, the suggestion I liked, where he was also suggesting that the Indian elites and the colonial elites were together in exploiting the majority of the people. And therefore, the question of compensation is not only vis-a-vis the Indian social elites, but also the colonial elites. Why? Because their empire today, the colonial empire today, what we have seen today, the whole Europe for that matter, is not based on their own merit, but because of the exploitative empire that they run throughout the globe. And because of that, they are today so rich. Shashi Tharoor made a very, very promising claim when he was speaking in Oxford on the same, asking the colonials to provide us reparation for that, for what they have done to India. So making kind of a claim against both, I think that is a very, very interesting suggestion, that it is not that the Indian social elites are benefited from such kind of an exploitative condition of the untouchables, but because the British were here for almost 200 plus years, and in collision with the social elites, and their empire is also built upon the exploitation of the untouchables and other marginalized social groups. So this suggestion creates some kind of an international appeal that against colonial exploitation, the way now people are demanding compensations and reparation and other profits, I think Dalits and the untouchables can also become part of the same. Very, very persuasive claim, I believe. Um, um, Three smaller questions I have. Uh, One is, as I said, that it's a very persuasive and very moralistic in nature. Um, One is this: when we are suggesting this particular relationship between slavery and untouchability, and you also quoted a series of historical evidences. But apart from this textbook in evidences that we have, the reading of the theology or the classical text, what can be strong empirical evidences in last 100 plus years, not going far past in medieval or in ancient, but in largely, probably even for that matter, last 100 years. What can be a substantive figures or case studies or resources where we can suggest that deep slavery is embedded. People are still suffering with the similar kind of exploitative practices, and there is no what you call space for emancipation. There is nothing which one can do, and that can probably create a better argument vis-a-vis what you are suggesting. Uh, Second was, I was also thinking about the policy framework. That this is kind of also a very radical and strong policy reform that you are suggesting. That not only land reforms, but cash transfer, or and in paper you also suggested that there is a possibility of reservation in private sector. So there are multiple suggestions that you have offered to check to kind of bring some solace to the worst of social groups. But I was also thinking that the political context in which we are living today, a kind of a neoliberal right-wing globe that we are not seeing. And when we examine that kind of a state, they are so antithetical to such kind of an offers that they don't understand this language of social justice, of compensation, or providing welfare. There is no audience to this kind of calls. These claims and appeals have some kind of an ideological suggestions, some kind of a challenging attitude to somewhere what you call to make sense of the current political condition. But as a policy framework, the new liberal political economy hardly had the suggestions or capacity or approach to deal with such issue. In such case, to whom we are addressing? When the state is so animalistic now, they do hardly have that kind of a moral lens to deal with such issue, and therefore probably there is some kind of a dealing from the actual political conditions in which we are living today. It appears a kind of intellectual exercise, a very powerful thought experiment, but to addressing whom? That question probably is crucial. Third, I was also thinking that what about capitalism in general? Capitalism is such an exploitative economic order. And whether you get a compensation, some relief, some profits, the system will not change. The system is based on hierarchical inequalities, and India, of course, the caste-based inequalities. So reconciliation or some kind of a moral sense about how state should perform for the benefit of the people, the larger system will remain probably the same. And therefore, probably more than such issues, the bigger question that probably Ambedkar asked or many great minds earlier asked about a good society, about a fair society, about a society where there will be human rights or better rights for everyone. Um, uh, this particular model somewhere also suggests that there will be continuous conflicts and dialogues and debates, and there is no possibility that any group, Dalits or Adivasis for that matter, or social elites will come on a same space where we can discuss that in a very amicable way. That possibility is not in this kind of a discourse. And therefore, probably compensation, reservations, or even for that matter, the claim that there should be special taxation on the capitalist class for to provide some relief to the poor and the marginalized. These suggestions are not changing anything across globe. These are what they call some relief, some solace. And therefore, probably more than that is required. Probably a kind of a reorientation about how capitalism should engage with society and what will be the future of capitalism in India or at the global level. I think those pointers are crucial, but I'm extremely happy that you asked me to come and discuss this, and only with the endorsement I can stop it here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Harish. And I think there is a lot of issues that you have raised, which I think need more discussion. And I am aware of the limitations of time. But before that, just to let you, so many of you who are there online, that if you can hear us, that's fine, because there's some problem with our video, so which we are trying to correct. But as long as you can hear us, that will be fine. And can I suggest that if you speak or whenever you speak, please mention your name at least, so that we are aware of who is asking the question. So what we will do is to have we will no we'll ask Amit to respond at the end, because we want more people to have questions. Is that fine with you? So should we do one question, one? Yeah. So we'll have first three questions from inside the room, and then we go to the online one. The let me also make it clear. Please, no longer comments, only questions, and be precise. If you have anything to say, be very precise, because there are a lot of people who want to ask questions. So if you're very precise, that will help others also to join the conversation. So I'll start with Joel, who has been raising his hand for quite some time.
Thank you for this very fascinating talk. I really didn't expect it, and I honestly haven't seen anything related to this discussion until now. So I would like to know, in the example that you gave, which was the Huzurabad district case, what was the work that led to it? How were they able to find a way to bring forward a public policy? And, based out of that example, could we blow it out of, its local proportion to, for example, make it a template at a national level? Is that an idea? Or if it's not, what would be then?
Context of dispossession, Adivasis tend to squander the amounts they get as compensation. It's an onslaught of a lot of money, and they don't know what to do with it. So, just thinking of the parallels. Thank you.
So this unfortunately, this policy was a response to a political situation. The person who was supposed to stand from the Congress party in that constituency suddenly moved to BJP, and that led them to decide that how are we going to get the votes, and they came up with this brilliant idea that let's just do this because it was a SC Dalit dominated constituency, and they did it. There's a report, and so that's the reason. But the outcomes were so good that now it's the pressure is on Congress. They I think spent some, I don't know, some crores of rupees on this policy, and so it's a big hole in the budget. So scaling it up, and this is one constituency, means that you need to find but budgetary allocation for it. The Your question about how the money was spent judiciously was because they were smart enough to make that usage of money conditional. So if you wanted to take those 10 lakh rupees, there were 10, 20 schemes through which you could do it. So they had vendors probably, I don't know if how it works, but if you wanted to spend the money, you could buy a tractor, or you could buy a car, or for as transportation, or agricultural equipment. It was linked. It was conditional on you buying certain things or spending it on, say, a lump sum payment for school education, repairing of your house. So because of that, it actually led to a lot of change, material change, and investment in income earning assets, and that is why you find that beneficial effect of it, rather than just giving the money and then expecting them to figure out how to spend 10 lakh rupees.
Can we have a second quick question? Yeah. Yeah. Which, yeah.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I was just, my name is Yogita. I work at the CSH. I was just wondering how you imagine reparation alongside the project of abolition. Because I'm thinking of reparation in terms of war, for instance, which puts an end to an event, and then after the event is ended, you compensate or you do reparations. But with an ongoing system of caste oppression, I'm wondering if reparation is something which would then say that this project has ended or this idea of oppression is ended and people have been compensated. So I'm wondering how you deal with that.
It's a very good question. So, so you have measures to try and mitigate exclusion, discrimination. You have reservations, you have other policies, etc. But you've never had anything to compensate them for their past experience. So, giving one may claim, and there are arguments also from African Americans, that we don't want blood money. We don't want blood money. Or if we get it once, we don't want any affirmative action. Any affirmative action is gone in the US now. But my contention is that if you give enough reparations and they are able to then develop those assets and income earning assets and all those networks, etc., and they might self exclude themselves from reservation if they want to go into the private sector. But to say that alongside, but in the private sector, they can be excluded. We have data which shows that you are extremely well qualified, but because you are Muslim, you are Dalit, you are a minority, you are excluded because for one job you have 200 applicants, all with same qualifications. So the HR is identifies by your surname and just feels that, I will uh, call some people for the next round. So that is also there. So you'll have to have both probably.
Just identify, and then this will be the last question from the room.
My name is Vidya. I teach at Jindal. My questions are basically just clarifications to something that you said. And thank you very much for this very thought provoking presentation. The question of figures, you were saying that you will trust the figures from 2012 and there are no, and the figures that are more recent are harder to parse. And I'm really wondering why you say that. Because I'm kind of intrigued by this sort of dependence on numbers, and I talk a lot about this when I teach technology policy. So I'm very concerned about the question of numbers. And the other question was about the Harvard Medical School Commission. And you said half of it was published and half of it was not, and there was a lot of politics involved. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that. Thank you.
After 2011-12, I mean, I think Himanshu can come in and help me out in this. The way surveys were done, I mean, it just stopped, right? You had a drought of data coming in, and then methodologies are changed drastically. And there is no continuity. So and you see suddenly dips in inequality, dips in poverty, and all the deprivation which you were measuring, and suddenly, post-COVID, post-COVID shock, post demonetization, post all that, you see things get improving. I mean, it obviously is really difficult to swallow at one level. And this and Lancet is that yeah, I mean, so Lancet got cold feet. They withdrew halfway. We cannot publish this 10 case studies document asking for reparation. This is our shop will shut probably. So they backed out. That I mean, the halfway through the review they backed out. The report was in the review state. They backed out that we will not publish this as a special issue. Then we approached this BMJ journal, some medical journal, because the entry point into this is health, right? And to our surprise, all the case studies from South have been rejected. Uh, no surprise there. British Medical Journal. And they recently had their editor changed, so there's something going on there. Now we're trying to send it to another journal, so that because we're going to have a website where all these studies are going to be published as a commission, reparations commission. So half of them are in the review process, and half, like after second review, like comments, they've rejected it. So there's that politics also happening. It'll come. The 5 will come online. The rest probably after some time.
Take a few questions online. So there is one from Ashwarya. Ashwarya, can you quickly ask your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for your talk. So, actually, I wanted to ask in the same line as Yogita, reparation alongside abolition, because I'm doing research on manual scavenging and its interface with law. So, what I found in my research is that the state apparatus has started basically using uh, compensation in the case of death of a worker during hazardous cleaning of sewer and septic tank as an escape route or to shrug off its accountability, its responsibility in the cases of this everyday and routine violation of right to life, right to dignity of workers who are engaged in such practices. So, how do we interpret this right to reparation in that case? Hello?
Yeah, I mean, these are different things. I mean, compensation after death, anyway, manual scavenging is illegal. So why is it happening?
Right.
If people are self-participating in it, and then the state is compensating them, it's a problem. It shouldn't happen. Compensation should happen, but this participation should happen in the first place. But that has nothing to do with if these communities had got reparation, probably they would send their kids to private universities for education, and this will never happen.
You wanted to ask a question? You raised your hand and then disappeared. Vasudhi, you are there? That was a mistake. Okay. Anyone else? Rama, you want to?
Hi, Himanshu. Can you
Yeah.
hear me? Okay. Thank you, Professor Thorat, for your talk. It was really, really fascinating.
Rama, we can't hear
Huh.
you.
Can you hear me? So I just wanted to ask, how do we translate this idea of reparation and like restitution and compensation at policy level? So we are talking about, when you're talking about reparation, both material as well as moral and emotional satisfaction to the community that has suffered. But if we really have to do, how are we going to do that? Like, that's my question. Like, how are we really going to like material in terms of are we going to like redistribute land or I mean something along those lines? Am I audible?
Yes, we got,
Okay.
yeah. So in the paper, there are lots of ways in which this has been thought, and these are just starting points. I mean, one will have to get creative. So yes, land reforms or land transfer is one. Then there is one option, one way of thinking about it is reservation private sector, which I talk about. Other is funding education of all children till graduate level, and the costing is given in the paper. And then a lump sum transfer of money to buy assets, which are income earning assets. So these are the few things which we are thinking of right now, and a reparations commission, which will then have subgroups, which can then go deeply into each area of health, education, employment, asset ownership, agriculture or land, and then come up with transfer schemes or ways to do that. So it's this the beginning stage, but there are some ideas in the paper. If you have access to it, please read that.
One question from Sukshadeep is that I was wondering if you could speak about the gender dynamics that can play into reparations process.
Thank you, Swakshadeep. That's a very good question, and it's something which is missing here historically to find data. I mean, one of the biggest problem with this research is that in case of African Americans slavery, you have records, actual records of plantation owners, number of slaves, what was paid to them, their daily routine, everything. Records are there, detailed records are there. In this case, the records need to be accessed at least during the British period, and for that, archival work needs to be done. British Archives is a source, and some other work needs to be done, where the gender aspect needs to be looked into more carefully. This is this first take is at the community level, but of course, the gender dimension would be critical and worse. There are other issues of domestic work for women or sexual slavery or Devdasi system. There are many other different aspects of this, and that is something which will have to be done. And I welcome people to do that as well.
No more questions online right now. We'll take one more question. Zakaria, one last question, quick. So can you take these two together, Zakaria?
So I had a lot of questions, but I'll cut short this. But I'm intrigued about the historical dynamics after the colonial period created different kinds of land revenue regimes, and when we look at today's outcome, we see that those areas that fell under Rayatwari system, their caste discriminations are slightly less intense compared to the Zamindari areas. So my question is that when we talk about reparation and we try to estimate the costing and all that, would that matter? Another associated issue with that is that there is a intersectionality issue at global level now, because you are talking about reparation within the within the national boundary, but then there is also a question of reparations from colonizers. So, and you know, where is this going actually? Who is compensating whom? Right?
Just identify yourself and a quick question if you can.
I'm Praveen. I teach history at Delhi University. I mean, it's coming from like I'm taking whatever Amit was saying absolutely in a sense, but I was just asking in terms of the political implication, as something Harish was asking the second question, with the new right wing, which is an antithetical to this approach. What could be the dialogue of, because if we see the politics of representation in a sense, and if we see that it's a generational thing, reparation coming from the generational thing in a society where it is, I see it as a different than the reparation for the black people, that this is the caste is imbibed by the Indian societies. So how do you see any, is there any engagement in there to discuss not only on the policy level, because Harish was asking at the policy framework in the new right wing and antithetical to this approach, but in a sense of what is the dialogue between, is there a dialogue you have thought about it? Between these?
Amit, now the floor is yours. You can also take the time to respond to Harish's. Yeah.
Okay, I'll respond to Zakaria. Uh, so, of course, the Raitwari, Zamindari, Mahalwari areas are different. And as some studies would tell us that the areas where you had Raitwari, the development in rural areas is better even now. So there is that positive impact. And if the ownership of land there is also has been with the tiller, then probably you don't need land reforms as much or not. That's a question. You have people in urban areas who are not connected to the rural villages anymore. Do they need land? I said yes. It's an asset. Give it to them. What's the harm? Or give them, if they don't want land, give the money equivalent to that. They can use it in one way or the other. Whoever needs land can use land. Whoever doesn't need land can take the money equivalent and forego the other things. So those can be thought of. The other thing to think about is that 2/3 of India was directly under the British rule under the various presidencies. The other was ruled by princely states who never accepted the 1843 anti-slavery kind of thing. They continued that till independence. Rajputana has written, there are there are documents which written to the crown that we do not accept this law. This is against our religious beliefs. So the rest of India, there are these variations for sure. So one will have to think about it. I don't have all the answers, and India is a continent, and there are variations. So yes, that is there. Reparations from colonizers, which Harish was also mentioning, that Shashi Tharoor is talking about that. So it was very interesting when I wrote in my paper that reparation should be paid to ex-untouchables and ex-cast-enslaved. And somehow there was an Indian person on the other side who was editing my work. And that person writes back, changes my line, and says it should be paid to the upper caste. So any reparation which comes to the elite here, you know what is going to happen with them. It's where is it going to go. So I'll just stop there. I will not answer more. Okay, then So I think it should go directly to.
If you speak longer, please put your.
My question was a little bit, I tried to tone down my question, but my question was that during the colonization period, the landed elite actually gained disproportionate advantage. So the repression that will come, or if we make any case of reparations from our colonizers,
It will come to the tiller of the
it
land.
will have to be.
It will come to the tiller of the land and the
Yes,
worker,
that was my.
not the one who's employing it and he's taxed.
So,
It's taxed and
I was basically critiquing Shaji Tharoor when I said that. Okay.
Anything else? I mean,
I'm not sure, Praveen, what you meant, but dialogue, political situation. I mean, so reparations have been paid by Canada to the tune of millions, by Australia, by New Zealand. These are all capitalist economies. And it's not as if they cannot pay reparations. So there are ample examples of reparations being paid to the Maori, the Aborigines, right? So as long till you bring up the debate, you make it important, and you back it up by demand. And someone was, if the tribals also come up with their demand, and that's clubbed with the demand for the Dalits and untouchables, it's a formidable force. Let's see which political party will deny that. If that becomes an electoral demand, I'm sure nobody can deny it. Any political party, be it BJP, be it Congress, any neoliberal party, this, if it becomes a big demand, which it is not right now, let me see who refuses it. I will counterpose the question. Harish, okay, Harish has so many things.
you don't have to answer everything.
No, so the first thing is, that's a very good question, was that empirical evidence for slavery and oppression, even the last 100 years. And I agree with you. I mean, we have just scratched the surface. Just looking over this entire period was completely overwhelming. But the last 100 years of the British rule has a lot of extremely well documented evidence. A lot of it is available online, but most of it is not. And for that, one will have to access the British archives and other sources. So there we can find a lot of stuff, I hope. So that's one. And I think your other question was that all these, in the paper I mentioned land redistribution, reservation in private sector, cash transfer, etc. How do we achieve this in the present political context? And again, my question is this: that if you make the descendants realize that this is their right, this is what is denied to them, and it becomes a strong political demand, I don't think anyone can refuse this. That's my belief, because it has happened in elsewhere. It is happening, as you rightly said. The Roma people are asking for it. The Congolese people are asking for it. The Caribbean people are asking for it. And once it becomes a global solidarity and a kind of a movement, I think it will be difficult to ignore it, at least, I think. Anything else?
think done.
I think we cannot wait for the regime change from capitalism to, say, social democrats, or even the revolution is not coming, I think. So we just take the dispensation we have and work with them and ask for our, right. And I think it will work.
But I must say that on an optimistic note, that nobody thought, at least at some point of time, that slavery will be abolished. I mean, like if you were, say, for example, in 1790, or for example, say in 1750, you would think that that is something which is a norm. Nobody thought that there'll be a day when slavery will be abolished. Or for example, the day that women will get the voting right. Or for example, the day when the blacks will get a voting right. So I think anything is possible as long as there is a there's a articulate demand. And what Amit has done is to basically put a very forceful argument, both ethically, morally, as well as economically, as to why at least we should debate it. I mean, we may not get an answer, and sometimes these struggles take generations. It is not something which is achieved in a 5-year or 10-year period of time, nor was the idea of reservation came. I mean, there's a long struggle that Ambedkar had to, or and others had to go through it for these to be achieved, or even to get basic education, for example, Phule and I mean, all those issues, I'm not getting into it. But I'm just saying that it's at least time to talk about these issues. And I think a lot of the questions in that sense are adding to the issues that we may be required to debate about it. As Harish basically said, that we have to broaden the discussion and move away from the question that how will it be done. First, we need to come to conclusion that whether we should do it or not. Then we find ways of whether it can be done or not. And if it has to be done, then how do we do it? That comes at a later stage. But I think there has been a very forceful, and thank you, Amit, for coming and making this argument here. Thank you to CSH, and thank you to the audience online, which has been patiently listening. And despite the technical problem from our side in terms of the image freezing without any the video working, it was something which is quite remarkable. We had a lot of people online, yeah, staying nonetheless. So, and my apologies for not being able to give time to some of you to ask questions. But as Amit has said, you can write to him and then wait for a response from him. And I can promise you it is not going to take generations to get answers. Thank you.